Welcome, everybody, to the Wellness Founders Podcast, where we explore the business of wellness and the people creating the future of well-being. Today, I'm super excited to have Jim Donnelly on the show, CEO and co-founder of Humanaut Health, a premium clinic for health optimization and longevity medicine. Jim, also the CEO and co-founder of Restore Hyper Wellness, and that's a role that you maybe left a couple years ago, but also there was a book involved in that called Restore. So there's a lot of restore going on in your life and in the things that you've built, and that's a book that highlights the life-changing power of right away wellness. Welcome, Jim, and really excited to have you.
Jordan, I'm super excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. You say there's a power in right away wellness. What is right away wellness for those who don't know?
Humans aren't patient. If you tell them to wait for it, they generally won't. And so in the wellness and health space, you have to give them quick results. So our goal is every time you come in, you walk out the door feeling better than when you walked in. You do a lot of that through the modalities, but you also do it through the greeting. You do it through the way you treat people. But we have a very specific approach to making you feel better right away. And the idea is we're trying to get you in the virtuous cycle of the more you do, the better you feel, the more you do. That's the virtuous cycle. The cycle most of people are in is the worse I feel, the less I do, the worse I feel. And so we want to flip that as quickly as possible, and making people feel better right away does that.
That's awesome. So deconstruct that for me as you're building, or you're maybe even if you're just giving advice to people in the wellness industry that are building a business. How do you evaluate the different touch points that someone has with a wellness brand or a wellness hospitality brand or coming into a center? And what are the things you're evaluating of, like, how are we giving them right away wellness at each of these touch points?
Well, there's a lot of ways you can do it. I mean, sometimes it's not even something that feels good or whatever, but say someone's coming in for diagnostics and they find out, hey, I now know all my data. I don't have any life-threatening thing that's about to kill me. They walk out feeling better, especially if you put your arm around them, um, give them some encouragement and say, all right, come back tomorrow and we'll get on the services. So, there's lots of ways to make people feel better way. We pick the order we do services. Like if you have cryotherapy, for instance, do it last, because people are going to walk out feeling better. If you have things like a shift wave chair, do it last. No matter how bad the interaction was for the prior hour, if you do a shift wave session before you leave, you walk out the door feeling better. Make sure your employees are smiling. A thoughtful greeting and a thoughtful goodbye. It does not have to be that complicated, but it has to be something, and it has to be intentional.
And tell me about how you arrive to that intentionality and you create processes that are systemized at that level, because um, I could sense that if you bring on new team members and they're just going through the motions of these types of services, someone may have someone do something at the wrong time. So there are ways that from the start, this is all systemized and extremely documented for everybody, or how do you arrive to that?
Everything that is important should have a process associated with it. The way you get a good process is through iterations and tweaking. And so everything that's important, we will run through a process. We'll test that process. We'll test different ways to get through that process, and we'll come to what we call the best way. And then that becomes our baseline. And then we'll try to make our baseline better. And we're constantly trying to make our baseline better. By the way, it's also important to have the right people doing it. We don't hire people that aren't into what we're doing for the customer. So if you have someone that's into what we're trying to do for the customer, they're far more likely to give you good insights and be good participants in the process.
And it seems like there's probably different feedback loops. Like, one feedback loop is, you have your employees who are saying, hey, like, I'm observing this is happening.
Yep.
This is probably the best way now to change. You have feedback from clients. How are you creating those feedback loops? And at what point do you decide, okay, that is actually the new way we're going to do it, versus, oh, that's good feedback, but we're not going to actually change anything?
Well, there are some obvious things. You look at everything from NPS scores, You look at dollar ring per, per interaction. You look at repeat customers and how often that's happening. There are very specific metrics you can use. And I would say anything that you don't measure will not improve. So you have to measure everything you're trying to improve. And I would say start simple. You don't have to go crazy, but you do have to measure it.
And for you, it seems like you've had a lot of success as an operator in this space. I was looking at some of uh, the metrics that you had for Restore, which was number 27 Inc. 5,000 fastest growing companies, private companies in Texas. Number 17 Fortune magazine. I go through all these. Number one in category miscellaneous personal care business. Number
Yeah.
one hottest franchise business in America. I mean, what does it take to build something that achieves all these awards? And what do you think is maybe Jim's secret sauce? Like if you had it.
Well, listen, I think the key to being a good entrepreneur and building a great business is number one, being self-aware. My two superpowers is I'm self-aware, I know what I'm good at, I know what I'm bad at, and I know what I need to build around me to build a great success. Number two, I'm egoless. And maybe not egoless. Egoless is too strong a word, but I'm egoless from the sense of the bad ego things. I want other people to get the credit. I want other people to be out in front. I want other people to feel like it's their idea and those sort of things. Those are the essential raw materials for creating a great culture. So then you go into a great culture. When we were launching Restore, our first franchisees had to be West Point grads. Well, guess what? A system that is built on the foundation of West Point grads is going to be stronger than a system built on the foundation of whoever has a check and can pay the franchise fee, we're going to take them. And so you think about a West Point grad, they go to the hardest school in the country. They're an engineer, so they know how to think through fixing things. They go through the hardest thing you can possibly go through. They get hazed, et cetera, et cetera. They're taught leadership. They're taught how to follow a playbook. And then just for kicks, they graduate and they go get shot at. Those guys are going to deal with the day pretty well. They're going to recognize good people, good humans, and they're going to build, sort of a little mini version of what you're trying to build 100 times again and again and again. When you do that, you can go super fast. You can be the high performing franchise that, all those stats indicate we were. And I'm very proud of that. It all started with a great business proposition, building a great culture, and having these sort of foundational constructs that would allow us to have a great foundation.
I'm hoping they left the hazing and shooting out of the franchises, but
You can have a little bit of fun hazing. Like you got to get in a cryo session. You got to get in a cold tub.
oh
You
yeah,
got to,
wellness hazing.
wellness
That's a new
hazing.
thing, right?
Wellness hazing is a good thing.
All right, so you said you know what you're good and you're bad at. What are you good at? What are you bad at?
Well, I think I'm really good at building a culture. I think I'm really good at attracting great people. I think when I define great people, I think it's both on the business side that they have to be highly intelligent, they have to be capable. And my number one interview question is what makes you special? And I tell people, I don't want to hear about your personality. I don't want to hear about what you think you're good at. I want to hear actual achievements that you have created, because that's the only way I know if you're really a great person. And so, if you put great people in a great culture, you are going to be able to create a great business. And I've done it across multiple categories. So we did it at Restore. We built a travel business called I Go You Go that won a Webby Award for the top travel site in the world. We had a real estate company that had clients like Michael Jordan and Cam Newton and Daughtry, and they sought us out because the stuff we did was super cool. And those are entirely different businesses, but this construct of how I hire people, create a culture is the same for every one of those businesses. And we're applying that to Humanaut as well. And people come in and they look at the team at Humanaut and they go, holy shit, man, how the hell do you have these people for this early stage of your business? We got a great mission. We got a great culture. We're helping society. This is the thing I want to be a part of. And I make one promise to anybody I work with or anybody I hire. I'm not going to promise you every day is going to be awesome. I'm going to promise you, you will be better off having been here. And I deliver on that. And so people want to come be a part of what we're building because they know they will have better options in their life after going through it. And some of that's easy, some of that's fun, but some of it's hard. And if you're not ready to do some hard stuff, don't come work for me.
Mm. And how do you deliver on that promise? There's a few questions I have, but the first one is like, how do you deliver on that promise that they're going to be better off?
Yeah, I think so. The way I try to deliver on that promise is I start by showing them tangible evidence of it. I say, hey, I'd like you to meet a couple of folks that used to work for me. I'd like you to meet a couple of people currently working for me. And it's really easy. It's almost like a coaching tree. When you think about like a famous coach, he
Yeah.
hires lots of coaches, they're
So
his
the
coordinators.
Popovich
And then
effect.
then they become head coaches. So what I can show you now is, hey, come meet Chris Neal. Chris Neal was my right-hand guy. He's now the CEO of a Blackstone backed company. He's a badass. He got that job before he was ready. He got that job because I endorsed him and said, this kid is so damn talented. You cannot possibly not hire him right now. And for anything that he's not ready for, he's emotionally intelligent. He's a hard worker. He will get it done. So once again, you start to get a track record out in the world and people will take your word for it. You start to be able to show other people that come in, hey, look at what happened to this person and this person and this person. Don't take my word for it. Ask them. Now, the hard part is doing the first couple. And I would say a little bit of that is showmanship. A little bit of that is conviction. A little bit of that is, smoke and mirrors. But at this point in my career, it isn't a hard sell.
Well, that's the mark of a true leader is their leadership development and
Yeah.
their ability to detach from helping other people in that way to become the leaders that they're meant to be without the attachment that this person has to be by my side forever
Yeah.
or has to be my mentee forever or what
Yeah.
have you. And I've noticed, at least for me, whenever I've been really truly invested in helping to develop people just because I want to see them win and I really believe in them and can see their skills and their talent, it's
Yeah.
always paid in dividends for me and for them because
Yeah.
they've strived to become whoever it is that they are. I'm able to make those introductions to them that, hey, it's like if I can make an introduction for you to have a better opportunity than to work for me or to whatever it might be, then that's awesome. Like that's what this whole game is about. So
Yeah. Well, I always tell the people that work for me, get your priorities and your currency right. Your priorities should sort of be something along the lines of your faith, your family, your friends, your work, and work shouldn't be close to the first three. Having said that, there are times to show up at work. If you're an accountant and it's tax season, yeah, you're going to grind through and you're going to prioritize that. But for the most part, get your priorities straight and then get your currency straight. It is far more important for me to develop my people and give them great opportunities than it is for me to maximize the dollars I'm going to make. By the way, doing that and having that approach will actually lead to more dollars for me. So, but if you pursue dollars ahead of impact as a construct, in the long term, it will hurt you.
yeah, I think there's a few interesting things there. You said get your currency straight and you talk about these priorities. To me, priorities seem seasonal in some way that
Yeah.
you've mentioned, right? Where there'll be times in your life where seasonally something else needs to be a bigger priority than something else, and there will be
Yeah.
some level of season that's true. But there is like the foundational macro sense that hey,
Yeah.
these things are just in my life more important in general. So how do you balance that between this is a season where X, Y, and Z is most important, and maybe it's a work thing, but hey, my family and my faith and all these other things are actually a higher priority. How do you
Yeah.
deal with that personally?
By the way, I joke with my friends all the time. I have a perfect life. And I'll say to them, man, I'm the best father you're ever going to meet. I'm the best husband you're ever going to meet. I'm a pretty good CEO. And I'll deliberately say that because I believe it. But what I also say is you have to toggle between them. You cannot be the best father, husband, CEO, brother, friend simultaneously. You have to have a really good sense of, in the moment, what is the most important thing that you have to toggle up. And I never toggle below a floor when it comes to being a father, being a husband, being a brother, being a son, that you can't ever toggle below a floor. But when you give of yourself and you generally lean into the right things, people will give you an amazing amount of grace when you have to go be the best CEO and work your butt off. My kids at this point, there are times when I've said, I really don't want to miss your game, Griff. And he'll say, Dad, listen, I know this is an important trip. You need to go to Australia because you're trying to build Humanaut in Australia. It's okay. And the reason he'll say that is because I've built up an incredible amount of equity with my son. I coached every team of his until he got to the point where I wasn't good enough to coach him. I've been to all the big events. I go to the school stuff. When he needs me, he knows I'm going to be there. And so he will now give me a ton of grace and say, Dad, it's okay. It's like, I know you need to do this. Go do it. And you know, I just went on a big trip around the world, and instead of taking 4 weeks to do it, I did it in 14 days. And that was the way I kind of modulated it. I got to go do this stuff, but I want to get back as soon as I can because, I don't want to miss any more than I have to.
I like the concept of the floor too, right? It's like there's never
Yeah.
with the main priorities, there's never a floor I'm going lower
Yeah.
than. But
Yeah.
in this, and then also the part that I really like is the in the moment.
Yeah.
And that is truly like being fully present and being fully capable of understanding that, there are work hours during the day that I'm totally locked in.
Yeah.
And like in those moments, I'm CEO. And
Yeah.
that's the most important
Yeah.
thing. And I'm doing that.
Yeah.
And yes, I will, if I got a call from my son in that moment,
Yeah.
hey, is
Drop.
everything
Yeah.
okay? Yeah, is
Yep.
everything right? So like there's kind of like there's the floor, right? I'm answering the call. So I like this I think you've painted it nicely. I am going to get back to the bad question, which you didn't escape, and I know that you don't care to escape what you're bad at. But before we go to that, I'm curious when you're deciding, with the amount of self-awareness that you have and with the ability to choose your impact, how do you decide? You've done a few different businesses that have been successful, but how do you decide a business or an opportunity is worth it to justify your life's effort and work to go after based on its impact?
Yeah, people ask me for advice on what they should do and things like that. And the main question they ask are number one, when should I do it now, and should I follow my passion? And I say, listen, I have a track record in a life of following my passions. I did a travel business because I love to travel. I did this really interesting company that incubated concepts in Charlotte because I had moved from New York and wanted to make Charlotte a more interesting place to live. I've now done Restore, and I own health clubs. And these are all things that were super important to me. The issue, though, is just because you're passionate about it doesn't mean you should do it. I happen to be good at doing those types of things, and they were things that people wanted. So if those three things don't line up, then don't do them. And so I've been really good at finding things that I was passionate about, that people wanted, and that I was good at achieving. And then I overlay that with this simple saying that I say at work all the time: a day that I don't cry is a day that I don't feel. A day that I don't feel is a wasted day. And by the way, I cry a lot. And I'm very quick to tell people, don't mistake that for softness. I went to Ranger School. I walked on at the University of Miami to play football as a 5'9", guy. And so I am very careful to say, don't mistake it for softness. But if you don't have that sort of metaphorical or literal sort of visceral thing happening when you do something in life, why are you doing it? Life is too short.
And what if you have multiple things that feel that way? Has
I
that been the
do.
case for you? And how
Oh,
do you
absolutely.
divide that throughout your life?
Um, I definitely have multiple things. That sort of day that I don't cry, day that I don't feel thing applies not just to work, but applies to a lot of other things, friends, family, et cetera, et cetera. But, I have learned in life that you can't do too many things at the same time. I had a time in my life where I was doing 5 businesses at once. I'm not a big fan of that. I'm a big fan of figuring out what you're good at and then just doing that. Um, and those that changes. And so the other thing I overlay on that is I tend to do things in 5 to 6 year periods. I think life runs in 5 to 6 year cycles. If you look at everything in life, in 5 years, it changes. You look at all the different sort of phases of school. You look at getting out and being a single person out in the world. You want a little time to sow your oats. Then you meet someone and you want a little time to kind of not have kids, and then your kids go through those 4 or 5 years. And so for me, the way I've kept it fresh is every 5 to 7 years, I change what I do. And, it's why I stepped down. Part of the reason I stepped down at Restore, it had been 8 years. I had already outworn my welcome. It's like, I'm not the guy that's good at optimizing a business at year 9. I'm the guy that's good at building a business, building a concept, building a culture. So once again, you have lots of constructs that you put together and they become more cohesive as you get older and more mature in how you do things. I know my construct. Do something I'm passionate about, make sure I'm good at it and that people want it. Apply the a day that I don't cry dynamic. And then make sure you don't wear out your welcome. After a certain amount of time, my sort of emotional, like enthusiastic salesman type approach, at some point it becomes wallpaper. And so I'm a big believer in, hey, at some point, leave. Let someone else come and be the new voice because they're going to be more effective than me.
Tell me about how with Humanaut, like you evaluated the opportunity and you felt the passion, obviously. You felt the gap. And like what was different between that and Restore and like the opportunity that was available and how you, because I think there's one part that's a practical view of what's the business opportunity here that I'm seeing. And two is this intuition, this passion of like, I got to run with this and like my heart's in this. So how did you navigate that?
Well, a couple things. This is a situation where life meets opportunity. I always start this kind of question by saying I could not have started with Humanaut. Humanaut was a culmination of 25 years of different things. I have owned health clubs, check fitness. I have owned Restore Hyper Wellness, check wellness, and some other things. Write a book, write away well, all of these things. I built a community that was world class. And that's a big part of, I think, health if you're going to get people to change their behavior. So all of those things led to me being capable of doing human. And I would say in the health optimization longevity space, there are a lot of people that have no business being in this space. They haven't put in the time, the effort, pulled the pieces together. And that's why they tend to focus on just a small piece of it. And that's the consumer issue we solved, which is an ecosystem that brings it all together in a cohesive way, and we're your co-pilot. There are very few people in this world that are qualified to do that thing and qualified to do it really well. And then because it's so complex, you got to bring incredibly talented people into the mix that are very passionate and mission driven. I couldn't have brought that same level of people in 20 years ago. And so, it goes back to having a construct, being self-aware, having your eyes opened. I've always been in this sort of business of identifying opportunities in my corporate career. I developed new brands for Coca-Cola. I mean, lots of different aspects of that. I also come from a family where my dad was a wacky entrepreneur. My dad was bankrupt 3 times. 3 businesses that failed. And so my family was relatively poor to begin with. And then on top of that, my dad goes bankrupt 3 times. But I tell you what, that goes back to the currency thing. I had a damn good life. I had a damn good childhood. And the thing my dad taught me is you might not get it right, but there's no debtor's prison in the United States. So if you don't get it right, worst case, you go bankrupt. The next day, you get to wake up, put on a smile, and go try something else. So that I think is the final thing I would add. Don't try to be perfect. Go follow your gut. Don't wait. Go do your thing. If it's wrong, stop as fast as you can. Don't waste good years chasing a bad idea or bad execution. Stop. Go do something else.
I really want to hit home and get like a clip about this currency that you keep talking about,
Yeah.
and it's like kind of defining your currency. Is that
Yeah.
how you call it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's that. If my assumption is not assumption, but if I'm hearing you correctly, if I'm understanding you correctly, it's that there is a currency you can choose, and that currency might be money, right? And that's
Yeah.
might be what you're chasing. But it seems like the impact of chasing currency that is instead impact or something greater contribution, that
Yeah.
is you choosing the right currency. Is that
Yeah.
fair to say, or how would you describe it?
Yeah, if you ask me about the currency that drives me, like we talked about a little earlier, like money is probably about the 10th thing. I am much more interested in impact, feeling like I'm doing something important and actually getting some traction there. I'm much more worried about the people that are around me. Are they in it with me? Are they contributing to the joy? Am I contributing to their joy? All of these different things. I want to make sure that um, I don't like think myopically every day and enjoy the journey. I have to be enjoying the journey, not just waiting on the final destination, because I think that's dangerous as well. And there are little breadcrumbs that tell you you're doing it right. For instance, I still introduce my wife as my girlfriend all the time. And I actually had someone earlier got confused as, wait a minute, I thought you were married. I am. I'm married to my girlfriend and I've been married to her for 20 years and we still treat it like that, and therefore it's more fun, more joyful, and it's okay. Now replicate that across 20 things. Um, I have great friends. I have 2 kids that I cannot tell you how much joy they bring me, and that's way more important than I have more money. And so there's lots of those examples. Everyone's got to have their own version of it. Money is in the stack, by the way. Like at some point, I do want to have a life where I can do the things I want. I want financial security, but I think living the right way with the right construct and prioritizing other things, it ultimately leads to good financial outcomes, and better financial outcomes because you're always joyful and in it.
Yeah. I'm curious about the difficulty of the challenge of financial struggle when you have a focus on impact, meaning there's sometimes a delay of that as a lagging indicator. And especially if money is a lower priority on the list, and especially for people in the wellness industry who are focused on so much on impact and passion and things like that, build maybe even building something big, there's this latency between, okay, now I'm getting a financial return back. That makes sense to keep doing this. How do you navigate that? How do you navigate just that delta?
Yeah. I do say that you have to be unselfish and selfish, and you have to get that balance right. Unselfishly, I'd love to wake up every day and the only thing is the social impact and the people impact and all that. That's great. Having said that, selfishly, I need to take care of my personal needs a little bit. I do need to make some money. I do need to build a bigger business. And by the way, that all gives me more resources, more money, more funding to go do the unselfish stuff. So you gotta do both. And you got to have the right balance and you got to know when you have to be selfish and when you have to be unselfish. But a totally selfish life, you are basically an a-hole. Like, like no one wants to be a part of that. It's not fun. It's not joyful. A totally unselfish life will be a life where you might not create the sort of the resources that you need and the abundance that you need to go out and do really big things. So as much as I talk about, I just want to help anyone who comes into Humanaut. I want to help everyone that comes into Humanaut, and I want that to be millions of people around the world. And so I cannot do that if I don't go out and build a big business, make real money, get big funding rounds and all that sort of thing. So you do have to figure out that balance as well.
And you have obviously built something that is now moving to different locations. I'm curious from the mindset of building big? Like, how did you think big enough at the beginning to know that I want multiple locations of this, or was that not the thinking originally? I'm assuming it was the thinking originally. It was like I want to have a ton of locations, or I want to build this in the image of this could be all over the world. And then how does
Yeah.
that manifest into reality of like going to these picking locations, saying I'm going to go here, I want to evaluate if this is the right market,
Yeah.
investors, all that.
Yeah, so I know what it takes to provide this entire ecosystem and do it well. And it does involve retail clinics. It does involve an e-commerce platform. It does involve our telehealth platform. Those are all three big things in and of themselves, and scale matters for all three of them. And so the idea of being a little one clinic model was never even in the equation. I have no interest in building a small business. I want to build a massive business. I want to touch millions of people. And so, how do I then choose the next location or think about it? Some folks would say you look at the country and you pick the markets and you prioritize them. I don't do that. I search for great partners. When I have a great franchise partner and they're in maybe they're in Kansas City. Kansas City might have been the 50th city in my priority list, but I got a great partner there. Guess what? That gets moved up to first. And so a lot of times I say I chase great partnerships and I chase problems. And so I just flew to India because we're doing Humanaut in India and Australia. So why would I do it in India? It's a little bit illogical, seems crazy. I mean, we haven't even opened up in New York City and we're flying to India. Well, because there's a huge problem to solve. Metabolic health is a crazy bad problem there for all kinds of obvious reasons. Our approach really works. And most importantly, we've got an amazing, like world-class pedigreed partner on the ground that says,
Uh,
Jim, I'm going to provide all the funding and I'm going to provide everything we need to do this right. I know this is not the smartest thing for you to prioritize right now, but I've moved it up in the priority list because of that partner and because of this big opportunity. And then I'll just hope that the money follows. And I'll do a variety of things to mitigate risk. You know, I'm not going to let it distract from what we're doing in the US. I'll create a dedicated team. The amount of money that flows to us up front has to be enough to make it worth our while, et cetera, et cetera. But that's an example of the partner manifested and the problem's big enough and every bit of the other pieces were there. So I made that a bigger priority than it otherwise should be. By the way, we'll be careful in how we sequence our announcements. Like I'm
mhm.
probably not gonna announce that partnership right now, although I'm on a public venue, so people will hear this. But I'm not gonna have my PR team talking about that until we announce some other locations in the US. But that was just an example of there's a problem that needs to be solved. It's a big opportunity. I've got a great partner on the ground. They're going to do all the things they need to do to help me mitigate risk. Let's move that up in the priority list.
And so when you're evaluating a partner, well, one, is there a sourcing mechanism of finding partners? And then two, how is it you're evaluating them? I know there's an intuitive piece, but there's also their qualifications and different things that maybe you're running them through.
Yeah, I used the West Point example earlier, and I don't want to leave anybody with the impression that I went to West Point. My wife went to West Point.
Uh,
Now, I went to Ranger School and I was an Army officer and all that. But when I find a source of talent and amazing people like that, I lean in. So there are a few versions of sort of West Point networks that I lean into. And what I've found is that everybody that went to West Point isn't great, and they're certainly not great at business, but the hit rate is pretty darn high. They're very talented, they're very smart. And so I want to go find these pockets of people that are going to increase my hit rate and likelihood to have a great partner. And you are going to miss sometimes, but I do have a few things that I look for. First and foremost, I want good human beings. And if I have to define good human being to someone, then they're probably not the right person. But, I always joke like, hey, listen, if you've been married 5 times, you're probably not going to be my partner. Getting divorced once, we all make a mistake. getting divorced 5 times, that might be a you problem. And so let's maybe not be partners, you know? I look at other things. How many times have you been sued? What's your relationship with your kids? What's your relationship with your parents? You know,
Mm,
there's lots of ways that I sort of screen subtly and directly around, are you a good human? Then I look at your pedigree, and I'm a little bit of a pedigree snob. I'm very proud of my thing, and I'm not some Ivy League, you know, kid that came from great pedigree, but I worked my ass off. I went to the best schools I could go to. I chose the hard challenges like Ranger School in the military. And so I'm looking for people who do that. And by the way, when it happens to be a Stanford kind of pedigree, great, awesome. You earned that. And now, then I look at your track record of what you actually did. You know, and I'm actually super hard on a young, talented kid that goes to Stanford and then doesn't do great things. I am so hard on that kid versus a kid that goes to Texas State and busts his ass and has great success. I am so proud of that kid. But to be fair, that Stanford kid's probably going to have an easier time breaking through to me because he's got a little more pedigree. So I'm trying to really hone in on the things that are indicators that you are smart, you are talented, you've done great stuff, and you're a good human being.
mm, love that. What have been the biggest challenges for you building Humanaut? And
Um,
also, and before that, when you're building Restore and some of the other things, biggest lessons, biggest challenges.
the number one lesson for me is focus and don't try to do too many things at once. And everyone that's ever interacted with me will tell you, man, I have a lot of ideas, I have a lot of thoughts. I can see something and then I can and very quickly process, well, hey, this would be a really good opportunity. So I've had to work really hard at kind of closing my aperture of what we should work on at one time. And so putting processes in place like OKRs and making sure everyone's on the same page and saying to everybody, guys, this is what we're doing. And by the way, that applies to me as well. If you see me migrating off, like you can say something to me. I oftentimes say a good culture is one that allows dissonance. And so when I'm violating the rules that I have put in place for everybody else, I have an organization where no one's afraid to say, hey, dumbass, like, look at what you're doing. You're doing the very thing you told us not to do. So you do need some help. I need help staying between the lines. And it's not that I won't do lots of cool things. It's just you can't do them all at once. You got to prioritize because an organization can only synthesize so many things, especially when it's super complex like Humanaut. So the biggest critique I got from people when I was building Humanaut all the time was like, well, aren't you doing too much? You're doing nutrition and movement and stem cells and hormones and on and on and on. What I did say to people back then was, well, riddle me what you would take out. Like if you start pulling pieces out, I'm not creating the ecosystem I set out to do. But within that, I did have to find what was the most important thing to solve next rather than trying to solve it all at once.
Mm, love that. Um, I want to circle back to what you're bad at before we get off here. What are you bad at,
Um,
and how have you found that out?
There's probably a couple things. I'm pretty darn loyal, and this might not come across as a bad thing. It's a little bit of a flattering way to say I a good human. But I'm very loyal, and so if I have an employee that probably I should move on from, I don't want to be too quick on that. And you know, you hear these sayings, these business sayings, you know, hire slow, fire fast. The reality of it is I probably hire pretty fast and fire pretty slow. Um,
Yeah.
and generally speaking, that's worked out for me. There have been a lot of times where that a little bit of extra time got that person to the next level and it worked out. But there have definitely been some times where I've kept people in a role they shouldn't have been in or they weren't capable of doing. And to be quite frank, that's not kind to somebody. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let someone free so they can go find you know, their real place where they're going to have impact. So that's one thing I would say. I am the consummate enthusiast and salesman. I always, always, always try to see the best side of things and push, 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 push. And so once again, there are times when, dial it back a little bit. The organization doesn't need a salesman right now. The organization needs a realist. And then I think the final thing I would say is, I mentioned I grew up in kind of a relatively modest family, and my dad went through some, business struggles. And so I've kind of worn that as a chip on my shoulder, and like, I'm going to go out and prove to everybody that I can do this and I'm a badass. And I think my wife and my mother would probably both say, I don't know if you're ever going to be totally satisfied. It's like, look around, dude. You got a perfect life. You say the words, you have a perfect life. You say the words, your currency is right. But there are definitely times when I can be a little bit like, what's next? Even though if I turn and look around, I mean, holy shit, what are you doing, dude? You stop. It's good.
Yeah, you're crushing
Yeah.
it.
So those would be the things I
Nice.
would say. There's more. Believe me, my wife, if she were here,
Yeah,
she could give you a
she'd
few
rattle
more.
off maybe 10 more.
She'd rattle off 10 more.
Awesome. Well, Jim, last question here is what's your legacy in the wellness industry? What's the movement that you're going to be known for creating?
Well, I do think that this notion of a humanaut is real. It's a movement. I think that, we have two things for our customers and our employees. You have to sign the Humanaut pledge, and that's the things that make you a Humanaut. And it's things like you think differently, you're intellectually curious, you'll try new things, And so we lay that out for people. And when you lay it out for people, it's actually really attractive, and that's the way people want to live. So we then want to go out and we want to propagate that to as many people as possible. And then the hard part of that is we make people sign the accountability protocol. We, starting in January, will guarantee medical results, but you got to sign up for it. And there's 5 things you have to do. On the accountability program, you have to do the work. And so you have to have a wearable so we can track your movement and sleep and all that. You have to hit your goals 80% of the time. You have to check in with us at least once. You have to be willing to change your protocols if it's not working from check-in to check-in. So a couple other things. And so my legacy is I want there to be Humanauts everywhere. I want this way of thinking about health and wellness in a more proactive, enlightened, intellectually curious way to be the way everyone thinks about health and wellness. And, you know, we'll see where the chips fall in terms of how big the business is, but I don't really think about that. And to be quite honest with you, you asked me what my legacy will be. I don't think about legacy, man. I I do think I'm a little bit like my wife in this regard. I think when you're at a business, it's like your hand is in a pitcher of water. When you pull your hand out, the water level moves a little bit, but no one notices, and then you're gone. I asked my daughter the other day, "Hey, you know this singer on this song?" And she's like, "No, I don't know this singer. It was Michael Jackson." It's like, how the hell do you not know Michael Jackson? And so that just illustrates to me that at the end of the day, yeah, leave the world a better place. Try to create some things that have some lasting impact. But at the end of the day, beyond my family, my wife, my kids, the people I care about, legacy is so ephemeral and so small. But while I'm still on this earth, I want to walk around and see this delta. I want to see the Humanot Delta all over the world. Millions of people living and taking care of themselves in a better way.
Well, when you guys are ready to move to Colombia, let me know.
Yeah,
That's what I'm
yeah,
hoping
that's a
to.
dream, man. You're living the dream. I love it. I love it. I love it. How did you get down there? What took you down there?
Well, maybe that's a good thing for post podcast to discuss.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear. But we're coming, man. We're coming. Like I just did a 7-country tour in 14 days. It
Yeah,
involved Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Mumbai, Bangkok, and Sydney, Australia. We will be all around the world, including
love it.
places like Colombia at some point.
Glad to hear it. And Jim, appreciate all the time today to share these thoughts, these insights. Where can people find you and find Humanaut? Where would you like to point them towards?
Yeah, go to www.humanaut.health.com. That's the main place. And if you want to get to me, go to LinkedIn and find me on LinkedIn, Jim Donnelly on LinkedIn. I'm
That's where I
easy to
found you.
find.
That's where I
Yeah,
found you.
I'm easy to find. What I will say is, give me a little time if you reach out to me. I do try to respond to everybody. But it might take me a little longer sometimes.
All good, Jim. Well, I appreciate you, man. Talk soon.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.